First of all, obviously, thank you for joining, whether offline or online. Really great to have everyone here to join with Chris Dyer, who I'll introduce in a little bit. But yeah, today we're here live out of Singapore in partnership with our great supporters, the Great Room, one of the most beautiful offices and event spaces I've ever been in. We cannot see it on the video right now, but I'll send a photo. We have a backdrop of the Singapore Ferris wheel. What do we call it? Is it the Singapore Flyer? The Singapore Flyer. I see the gardens by Marina Bay Sands, really, really beautiful. But most importantly, I see Chris, so that makes me very happy. And then also we're supported by hrtech.sg, so platform for helping HR leaders discover all the fun things that tech can do for them to make their life easier and better. And yeah, today we'll be talking about team and culture and communication in remote work. And just a little bit about us before we get started, because at the end of the day, that's part of the reason we're here. So we are FlexOS. We just launched officially last month. We just closed $1 million seed fund raised by investors who previously invested in PayPal, Dropbox, and more. And we help companies go hybrid. So when companies are transitioning from traditional office setting and traditional ways of managing, we help them get to hybrid, and specifically we help them get people back together when it's very convenient for us all to work from home. And even as we see it today, while we are all in the same city, in the same country, a lot of people still joining online because, again, it's so convenient to do it from home. And that means that there is a lot of interesting things to be discussed about, working remotely, and how do you, again, manage teams and culture when you are remote. So today we're joined by Chris, and I have a bio here. I'm sure Chris can introduce himself much better. But just in case he's too humble to share all of his accomplishments, I'll do it on his behalf. So Chris Dyer is a performance expert and a very well-known leadership speaker. He was recently ranked on Inc.'s Leadership Speakers Who Can Transform Your Company Culture list. Wow, that is an amazing list to be on. He's also the founder and the CEO of People G2, a background check company that has appeared on the Inc. 5000 list of the fastest growing companies 5 times. Wow. I can imagine you're a fast growing company one time, but then if you do it 5 times, that's pretty impressive. So we need to find out how Chris did that. And then, of course, the books, which have been translated even here in Asia, around the region. One of them is the best-selling book, The Power of Company Culture, which is all about how companies can develop a culture that improves productivity, performance, staff retention, company reputation, and profits. And then basically from all that, he's flying all over the world to tell people how to do this new way of working. So we are going to come back to Chris in a little bit to hear some insights from him. But first, we want to hear from you. Who are you? What are you most interested in? What is it that you're really trying to get out of this topic? So anyone who wants to join first and share a little bit about what they're hoping to get out of this session today. Feel free to unmute, feel free to open your camera if you want to share here with the group. Or should I volunteer someone? Madel, are you able to speak?
Dan, this is Florence. Why don't I start here? Hi.
Excellent. We love it.
Thank you so much. So I'm Florence, and I'm actually the CHRO for Clifford Capital Holdings, a specialist infrastructure financing company. So I actually have my team members, Eugenia, Leslie, as well as Shunzi, who is on this call. Just in a nutshell, we have actually moved on to remote work, because of the pandemic, and we've moved into hybrid work. We are right now in that space where, having started this company for 10 years, we're at a point where we're also looking at what is the corporate culture, what it means for our employees. So it's really a very timely session for us, because as we attend this, we are also separately looking at having surveys on cultures, to get some feedback from our employees, etc. So keen to hear what's from Chris, on what's happening out there. things that we could take away to actually look into it in our organization. So thanks for organizing this call.
What a beautiful way to kick off the introductions with Florence. So it sounds like you're like really in the midst of trying to figure out this whole topic. So hopefully today will be very valuable. And of course we will hear from Chris, but also others who are going through it right now, right here in Asia, and their experiences will be very welcome to share in. So anyone else on online or in the room who want to share a bit about what they're here for, what they're hoping to get out of this session? Madel, Shun, Grace, Amelie. I'm sure there's at least one more person brave enough.
Hi, this is Tanya.
Tanya, good morning. How are you?
Good, very good. I'm actually very glad that I follow you on LinkedIn. So I came across this interesting session because interestingly, I work for MESC, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Myanmar, and we are actually going through a transformation where we are not only adapting hybrid work, but also we are onboarding a lot of new colleges through the merger and acquisition of two new companies. So it is very important for me as a marketing and communication manager that going to try to equip everybody and adapt our team to go through this transformation, this change. So I think this is going to be a very interesting session and very useful, and I'm excited to see what's going to come out.
Awesome. Okay, Tanya, thanks for joining. And that sounds like a really interesting challenge to not only get your own team over to hybrid, but then also absorbing companies that you're acquiring and somehow make all of that work at the same time. Thank you for sharing. Then I'll have to hand it over to our expert for today, Chris, best-selling author, famous speaker, enthusiast of going to Disneyland. Great to have you here today, and thank you for joining. I know due to time zones, it's pretty late for you, so thanks for doing this for us. And yeah, we would love to hear your sharing on this topic, and I will hand over the controls to you in case. Did you have any slides you want to share, or we're just going to share?
I do.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
so.
Then I'll see if I'm technically capable. Adapt. Oh, you're already co-host. Okay, so you should be able. I'll stop sharing here, and then you should be able to take over the controls.
Yeah, it looks like I can force it here. So, thank you so much for having me. I'll get this swap that there. Hopefully, you're all seeing my screen now, and you will notice at the bottom of my slides as I go through this, my email is there, my website's there. So if you'd like a copy of this deck, or if you have a question that comes up later on, happy that you can reach out. As Dan mentioned, I was really lucky to have one of my books translated into Vietnamese, so there's at least a little bit of help there if anybody needs it. But I'm really excited to be here to talk a little bit about remote and hybrid work. And I'll tell you, I've worked with a lot of different big organizations on this topic, both when the pandemic happened. I think I did like 200 webinars and trainings just in the first year of COVID. And then going back and working with them again on hybrid. And so this is something that is not going away, that, big organizations, small organizations, everyone is thinking about. But what I find fascinating is that every one of these companies you see here, and I would say all of the ones that I worked with, they all have a different set of needs. There's a different sort of formula to what makes it work for them. And there are some universal basics. There are some things we always need to do. But it is fascinating to me how customized, based on their culture, based on their location, based on the countries they're in, how it kind of morphs and changes a little bit. So if you don't feel like you have it quite figured out yet, that's okay. You have time. And hopefully I'm going to give you just a few of the most common things that I talk about, that I see that have impacted my clients the most, that might be good conversation starters for you as well. So how do we make hybrid work? And this is hybrid, this is remote. How do we make this work for our organizations, for our people? on an everyday basis. And probably even maybe phrase it this way, but most importantly, how do we make it work for our senior leaders so that they will continue to support this and continue to allow this type of work to happen? Because if it doesn't work for them, they're not going to allow it to continue to work for the average employee who benefits, I think, from it the most. So the first thing is hybrid work. What is the difference between hybrid and remote? And a lot of people think that it's a location thing or it's location centric. Really, hybrid is just about defining when we're together, when we're not. And what does that mean? And for so many companies, that's rigid. And for a lot of companies, it's very flexible. It's just, well, show up twice a week. That's cool. Other companies, it's you must be here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you can be at home. And it's, it's very, very different. What I find works the best, if you're going to do hybrid, which I think is the most difficult system to implement, traditional work and remote work are far easier than running a hybrid shop, in my opinion, and based on what I've seen my clients do on a consistent basis. The easiest, simplest thing you can do, if you take nothing else away from me today, if you do this one trick, it will help you so much. And that is if everyone pretends they're remote, no matter where they are. So if you're going to have a meeting, everyone's on Zoom or everyone's on Teams or whatever you use. Don't have 3 people sitting in a conference room talking and getting all that benefit and those 2 people dialing in didn't get that. Everyone should pretend they're remote. And when you do that, the rules are the same for everyone. Everyone has the same experience. And there isn't this idea of missing out or that somebody's getting something else. Because sometimes in hybrid, you have people that maybe are in the office all the time and some that are barely there. And that gets to be really difficult. Many years ago, we had a gentleman come in and he studied my organization. So I just recently sold my company at the end of last year. I had 45 direct reports and I had 4,000 employees and independent contractors that worked for me in my organization. And we did a lot of research, did a lot of studying about what made them tick. And one of the things that we discovered was that their hierarchy of needs was very unique. So if we went and surveyed the average company of people who everyone's in the office together all the time, this pyramid would be upside down. Personal connection, personal satisfaction would be the most important things to people in an office because you're with those people, your best friends, you have your work friends, you have this whole social connection thing going on. When we are remote, the pyramid is totally different. And this is so important for leaders to understand. Overwhelmingly, my people said the most important thing to their work, the most important thing that they valued was work-life balance. It means the ability and the authority to manage their time. The more I could let them decide when to get their work done and only focus on results, the better. They wanted social interaction, they wanted meetings, they wanted an ability to talk, but professional satisfaction was far more important to them, getting the job done, doing a good job because that's their job, than personal connection, friendships, and personal satisfaction, feeling important or politics and things like that. So hybrid and remote work actually creates the system and the hierarchy for what senior leaders say they really want, which is they want people to be results oriented and to get a good job done all the time. So there's a lot of data around that. Now, one of the other more controversial things that I love to talk about is that employees hate feedback. They hate it. What they really want, they want your attention. Whoops. Sorry, I must have my timings button on here. I'll fix that while we're talking. So what they really want is for you to give them your attention. And I think managers mistake giving someone feedback for attention. So an employee wants to know, how am I doing? Am I on the right track? Am I headed in the right direction? Is this going the way you want me to go? That's the kind of things they want. They don't really want, you didn't do this well, I didn't like how this went. Can I pull you aside and give you feedback? Now, what do you do if you need to change behaviors? I actually got this from my friend and mentor, Marshall Goldsmith. is this concept of feed forward, which is the next time, can you try to do this? So let's just pretend we were all in a meeting and Dan wouldn't shut up. He kept talking and talking and talking and talking. And I pulled him aside afterwards. I could say, hey, why wouldn't you stop talking? Like, what was going on, man? I got to give you some feedback. You're just blowing up that meeting. We're going to have a really negative interaction. This is not going to go well. But if I said to him, hey, Dan, in the next meeting, can you make sure everyone has an opportunity to talk? Can you make sure that you listen twice as much as you talk? Can you make sure that, maybe you let other people go first, or whatever that direction is? He'll say yes every time, because I'm asking him for future behavior. He can control his future behavior. He can't change the past. And feedback is inherently negative because we're talking about the past. So in remote work, I find giving these like constant forward, hey, this is the what you do next time. It's almost like, I shouldn't use sports, but it's almost like the quarterback or the captain on the team bringing the team together and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do on the next play. The next time we're going to go do this thing, right? The next time I kick the ball, you go to the right. Like, I'm giving the instruction. I'm not pulling them in and saying, what the heck's going on? Why did you miss that last play? It's like, no, the next play, let's try this thing. That's the kind of direction we want to be giving people, because we often don't get as many opportunities in hybrid and remote work to make those changes, to make those interactions with people. One of the other big things that I hear from a lot of my big companies is that they feel like their managers are lacking the ability to connect. A lot of companies say, well, in remote and hybrid work, we don't connect as well. The culture is not there. I don't feel like I'm as close to people. And I will tell you that's a bunch of BS. It's a bunch of junk. All it means is that they haven't trained their managers the new ways they need to connect, the new ways that we need to find a way to find out what's going on with our people. Because in a normal office, what happens? I see you come in, maybe I see you're late, maybe I see you've been crying, maybe I see you look disheveled because there's something going on with you at home, right? On remote work, all I see is your face on that Zoom call, and I have no idea what's happening. And I've lost the ability to maybe pick that up in an office. So we need a new way to do this. So here's a free exercise you can do. I did this with my team almost every day, only once a day. And so only with your close report, just the people you work with all the time. You would come into a meeting, 30-minute or more meeting, and you would go around and ask, how are you showing up? They will answer this as the person. How are you showing up? I'm tired. I have a newborn. I haven't slept. I got a new puppy. It wouldn't shut up. My grandmother's not well. I'm doing great. I just closed the great big contract. I'm really happy. My son's getting married this weekend. I mean, you're going to hear all kinds of answers. How are you showing up? How are you feeling? What's going on? Not how are you? And I don't know how it is in Singapore, Dan, but in America, you say, how are you? Everyone says fine. It didn't mean anything. No one really answered the question. It was a false question and a false answer. How are you showing up tells us something, okay? And then when the meeting's over, we go around and we ask, how are you leaving? This is the employee answer. The first one was the human being answer. The second one was the employee answer. How are you leaving? Wow, this was a great meeting. I got all my questions answered. Or, I'm really nervous. I don't think the client's going to like what we just came up with. I think we should talk again. Right? Or I don't think the boss is going to go for this, or whatever the feeling is everybody has. I can't tell you how many times I was in a meeting and I thought the meeting went really well, or I thought it went really bad, and we did the how are you leaving, and they totally shocked me, and with the opposite thing. Sometimes it was better than I thought, sometimes it was worse than I thought. But I wouldn't have known that as a leader if I didn't ask, and I didn't realize people were struggling. So when you're going around the room and you're asking how are you showing up, if someone says something really, really important or disturbing, like they just found out their grandmother passed away, my response is, why are you on this call? Please go and take care of yourself and your family, and you can show your team that you care by creating space and boundaries for them. If you notice that they're really tired because something is happening in their life, maybe they're taking care of a sick loved one, or they have a new baby at the house, you can take off their workload a little bit. The team can step up and help them, right? This is a way to show that you care and that you want to help that person. Now, if you are the leader in this group, it's so important that they must go first and you go last. Because if I show up and I say, I'm awesome, do you think my team is going to feel good about saying they're not so awesome? No. And if they say they're struggling, nobody cares if I'm struggling or if I'm doing good. If they're struggling, I got to just suck it up, not talk about myself, and focus on their well-being. This exercise right here will totally create like a next level of culture, a total level of connectedness with your team in a way that only by being together could you replicate it. And you just got to do it once a day. It's not going to magically happen when you do it one time. You're going to have to keep doing it and keep doing it. And over time, people will share more and more, and they get more and more comfortable. And again, this is with your team, the people you work with all the time. I wouldn't do this with somebody in IT that you talk to once a year. They're not going to open up to you. It's not the same thing. All right, I know I'm running a little long here, so hopefully that's okay. I say stop having one-on-one meetings when you're hybrid and remote as much as you can. They're a total waste of time. You spend all your time in one-on-one meetings. You never have time to work. As much group meetings as you can have, 5 to 7 people. Get your work done, collaborate, talk, and then async, talk in Slack if you need to let people know things. Stop having these one-on-one meetings that are just waste of time. The more we got rid of one-on-one meetings, the higher our productivity was, the higher our employee scores were, and the more we got done and the faster we grew. We still had sometimes you have to have them, but more team meetings. Create space for recognition to happen. In a traditional office, it's easy to like stand up and say, hey, so-and-so won the big contract. You lose that in remote, so make sure we have it at a water cooler room in our Slack. You could do it in email, whatever, just as long as there's a place where people know where to go and celebrate. And then make sure that you are the dictator, you are the absolute ruler on meetings. They must start on time. They must end early. Meetings should never go late. If you allow meetings to go late, you are killing your culture, you're driving your people crazy, and they hate it. End early. Not end on time. End early. Give them all a little bit of extra time every time you have a meeting, and I guarantee they'll want to be on every meeting you call. And if there's no agenda, do not have a meeting. Absolutely do not have a meeting. I'm going to skip the one question survey because I know we've been talking for a while. If you'd like to follow me on TikTok or Instagram, I do a lot of little plugs and little things that talk about a lot of this cool stuff. So if you want to take a picture of that, my email's there. If you didn't catch it, I'm sure you can find me on those platforms. It's not that hard. If anyone would like to take a remote leadership course, there is a 50% off discount. It's on my website. There's a free coupon for you if you'd like to take advantage of that. And there we go. I'm done. Dan, back to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Chris, so much for your sharing. I'm sure just kind of you going through all those points, people picked up a lot already. I have too many things that I wrote down to say, oh, that was good. So just kind of, I'll kind of highlight the last one, which is this idea of being a dictator, which not just because I'm the CEO of the company, but I think there's something to that. I always said to the team, really my Bible for what we're doing is Priya Parker's book, The Art of Gathering, which is all about how do you create meaningful meetings. And, she says like the moment that you don't take control of a meeting is basically the moment that you give up, right? Because then someone else can take on that meeting. So I really like that one. And then the other one, which I think is a bit more sort of foundational, is that idea that companies are complaining that managers don't do a good job, but what has the company actually done to train managers to manage in this new reality? I mean, that's something that we hear constantly from every single prospect or customer we're talking to. How, as a 27, 28-year-old, first-time line manager all the way up to, a Gen Xer who has to manage a team of 500 people. How are we suddenly capable of managing in this new reality? So I found that very insightful too. Anywho, those were just some of my takeaways, but let's go to the people who are here to ask you questions. And if possible, why don't we start with Florence? Because Florence, you said you have some very specific reasons for being here. You're doing the remote survey, you're focusing on culture. What Chris shared today was helpful, and do you have any immediate follow-up questions?
Thank you, Dan. I think Chris has shared, some very good tips. I really like the part about feed forward instead of feedback. I think we all, learn, but, I thought it's a very good tip, simple, and something that I'm going to actually take away really quickly to share with the leadership team. But Chris, just a question for you. I mean, in your observation as we transition over the pandemic period into remote work, have you, around Asia, have you seen, any difference in terms of employees' response, and adoption rate, any difference between Asia as compared to other parts of the world?
Well, so certainly there are big differences. There are technological differences. I think there are differences. Maybe if I cut China out of that, I don't know if that's a fair thing to do here or not. There seems to be one thing happening in China, and I sort of feel like the rest of Asia, there's sort of a different thing happening. So outside in China, there's sort of the much different restrictions as far as COVID goes, is sort of forcing particular things to happen that maybe quite aren't as organic as what's happening in the rest of Asia and the rest of Europe. So I'm seeing that there's still a pretty high level of adoption and acceptance for hybrid, at least. And this was the silver lining of COVID. It forced people to try this, and then they saw great benefits. I mean, most managers would have never believed that employees were going to do a great job working from home, that they had to have this carrot in front of them or a whip behind them to make them work, and that wasn't the case. So I'm still seeing a pretty high adoption rate, at least amongst the pretty large companies inside of Asia. In Europe, what's different is there's actual laws going into place to support it and to keep it in there, and so there's a bit more of that structural protection. But in Asia, there seems to be somewhat of a benefit, and their companies seem to be understanding that allowing this where it makes sense has been really good.
Right. Thank you very much. And actually, not a trick question. I'm just going to switch on my video right now. The question I have for you, Chris, is that, and then this is a conversation I had with some of the practitioners in the market. The question on, when we do a virtual meeting, what we have also seen is the tendency for videos to be switched off. We deliberated on whether, is that something that we want to mandate participants, to switch on videos? Is it the right thing or not the right thing to do, right? And I've also heard in some of the technology firms, employees are coming back, very quickly to say we are having Zoom fatigue. It should be something that you make it flexible, etc. So just keen to hear from you on this part, because as a HR person, I would always like to see, the person, how the person is responding, reacting if I'm doing a virtual meeting. So keen to hear from you in terms of market practice on this. Yeah.
So when we hear people are having Zoom fatigue, there's two things. That's a symptom, right? So what's the problem? The problem is the meetings are probably too long. Number one. So the meetings should be shorter. It's better to have 2 30-minute meetings in a day than one 1-hour meeting, right? Give people time to process, think. So number one, if you're going to essentially have cameras on all the time, the meetings need to be shorter. They're just there's actually the part of your brain. If you imagine if you were out in a forest and you were worried at night that a bear was going to sneak up on you, that part of your brain that's constantly scanning for danger is the same part that's scanning all these little icons looking at people's faces. And because we all are a little bit narcissistic, we're always looking at ourselves about 25% of the time to make sure we look okay. That's exhausting. And that is not what we have to do when we're sitting in an office, right?
Yeah.
So what our solution was, we had two things that we did. If they were short meetings, they were required to have their camera on. Okay, so 30 minutes or less, camera had to be on. Hour-long meeting, two big meetings, which I didn't do often. I didn't like big, long ones, but we would do camera on at the beginning and camera on at the end. So camera on, say hello to everyone. We're all here, right? Check in, maybe do that bonding exercise, and then it's optional. They could turn their cameras off. I always kept my on as the leader to set the example, but it was totally fine in a long meeting if they wanted to go cameras off.
Right.
The one other exception we had, and I don't know how this translates to Asia, but we had what we called the no mascara day. Meaning, if you had a bad day, if you just couldn't be on camera today, and this was for the guys too, anyway, we call it the no shave day, the no mascara day. If you just felt like today, I just can't possibly be on camera, I'm just not feeling it, it was okay to tell your team, today I'm having, and we used the no mascara because that sounded funny, I'm having a no mascara day. As long as they didn't do that all the time, it was once in a while, cool. Because sometimes people just, they've had a bad day. Right? And they just didn't want to be on. And that was okay.
Right. Thank you.
Does that help? Yeah.
Certainly, Chris. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Florence.
Thank you.
Great. I love that that back and forth, and very appropriate, Florence, that you switched on your video right as you were asking. Oh, and switching it off right as you finished asking the question. That was beautiful. Extremely well timed. And love that notion of the no mascara day. And I think, Chris, also the idea of, like, again, it just kind of requires a rethink, right, on how we work and how we collaborate and how we meet. Simple things like, if it's a short meeting, why not have the video on? If it's a longer meeting, you cannot simply just require people to sit there the entire time looking at themselves, looking at others on camera. So yeah, why not let them switch off in between? I think someone that we're working with here a lot says, it's beginning, end, and when you're speaking. So when you take the speaking turn in a meeting, you switch on your camera. Again, we do get a lot from seeing people, right? I think that's always the difficulty of just working online. We kind of forget that we're human beings. So at least having that visual component is helpful. But I think, to your point, no one wants to stare at themselves for an hour, at least. Definitely not myself. And we met someone yesterday who said he got so used to looking off screen because he didn't want to look at himself, that now even that work is back to normal and he is back in person, he keeps looking off screen when he says something to people. so we somehow have maybe gone a little bit too far. But I thought it was really really insightful. Any other questions here on the call or in the room about remote work? And you can raise your hand. You can just simply unmute. You can keep your camera off if you want, but just jump in with any questions you may have. Oh, we have a question in chat. I just heard from our producer. Okay, so let me see if I'm technically capable of opening the chat. Yes, I did it. Okay, so Emily. I saw Emily is on the way to the airport. So Emily is asking, do you have any tips or advice to focus on communicating and culture sharing for international teams? Very interesting. She just came back from Europe. Thinking of an infographic done by Netflix about the culture differences and level of understanding different reactions to the same email, for example. Yep, that is a great one, Chris.
Yeah, so one of the things that we did was we removed all internal communications out of email. All internal communications had to be in Slack. So if it was just inside of our team and moved to Slack, and I found that helped build more culture and eliminate some misunderstandings. Because in Slack, you kind of remove some of the formalities and some of the, they signed, with gratitude. What does that really mean? This sort of like picking up on these passive aggressive things. And we highly encourage people to use GIFs and emojis inside of Slack to really convey the message they were trying to convey. Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they laughing? Is this funny? Is this sarcasm? But it's also super important that teams, or people that are working together on a fairly regular basis, amongst different geographies and different cultures and different countries, they do need time together, at the very least on Zoom or some other platform, to connect social, to have social connection. And so I'm not a big fan of like have to do something every Friday or like forced social time, but like, can you do trivia with your team once a month? Can you just every once in a while? And honestly, that bonding exercise will really get people connected. I do a lot of other team building exercises for companies that just help teams just bring them together. And I find that if there is a misunderstanding, if there is they don't really understand what someone else is saying, they're more likely to say, "Hey, I didn't get what you meant there. Can you help me?" Because they feel closer, right? They don't feel like they're strangers and then just assuming somebody's got a problem. So there's a cognitive bias called the oh, now I've forgotten it. Not the availability history. Doesn't know. I'll think of it in a second. But there's one that just basically says we assume people, if they do something we don't like, it's because there's something wrong with them. But when we do something wrong, we it's because of some other force of nature, right? It was something else
That sounds
caused
like the
it.
humanity bias.
Right. It's
That sounds
something
like people
similar.
being people.
Right.
Right.
So this is helps cut down those walls, right? So if somebody does do something that makes us upset, we feel close enough to them to go and have a conversation.
Totally. Yeah. Definitely sort of, moving things to Slack, making it more conversational, and then still kind of creating those opportunities for people to get together. I think that's, again, really going back to for larger organizations, right? That's very easy to say if you're running a small team by yourself and you're a very inspired leader and you follow Chris's advice very actively. Obviously, it gets a lot more difficult, when we're talking to someone yesterday, 3,000 person company, hundreds and hundreds of line managers, right? How do you get all of them in that sort of cadence of, hey, it's been a month since we actually got together about something that wasn't work, right? Or, it's been a while since we really got to know each other as people, right? Or it's been a while since we've seen each other. How do you kind of like get everyone on that sort of like schedule of, you should never go too long without that reconnection, because I think, again, all the technology is there, right? It's clearly very easy for us to be partially in a room, partially online, you in the US, and have this conversation. But if we would just then go back to Slack or to email and be collaborating for months and months without this kind of interface, it's going to be very difficult for us to still see each other as human beings. And then it's going to be more like, oh, why did you deliver that late? And to your point, there is that bias towards, oh, they're slacking off, right? There must be something wrong on that side. So yeah, how do you sort of combat that? How do you make sure that we always keep the balance between what we can do online and then what we can do more socially?
And I think for anybody, remember, you can only do your part. So if you are a manager with a team and you're not in charge of everybody else, all you can do is the best you can for your team. And people overwhelmingly, how they view you as a leader is generally how they feel about the CEO, and how they feel about their team is generally how they feel about the company. So you have a huge impact on what happens to your company by just being an awesome team leader or an awesome boss of the team.
So that obviously puts a lot of pressure then on, again, managers who could have 20 years experience, but also who could have 2 years of experience. And then, as we're hearing it now a lot of the times, and again, anyone here on the call, jump in with your questions, raise your hand, put it in chat. As we hear it a lot, we have people who say there are now team members coming in to the workforce. Again, Singapore had circuit breaker lockdowns for a very long time. There's people now coming into the workforce who've only worked remote. They've actually never been in a physical office. They've never worked with a team face to face. And suddenly they're being asked to, hey, we're going back to the office. And it just doesn't compute, because they're like, but why? For an entire year, I was able to work perfectly online. Why are you suddenly dragging me in? And they don't have that background of knowing the value of collaborating face to face. They don't have those experiences of, man, I only got that deal done because I invested in building the relationship. And again, building relationships happens a lot with either these kind of video calls or meeting people face to face and taking them out for a coffee or taking them out for a drink. But that behavior simply doesn't exist because that experience doesn't exist. So how are you seeing that, maybe a more global view, but on these like younger people coming into the workforce and they're, kind of growing up with remote work?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably one of the most challenging times for a young person to be in the in this environment, right? Where, to your point, they may have never worked in an office. They may have started off working from home. The challenges on them technologically and the sort of things that they have been brought up to do or not to do by having essentially living on their phones their entire lives. Are the first probably real generation that like maybe had a phone from the time they were 8 years old, and like all of their communications are done on the phone. Here I am doing this, like this is so old school. That's not how they do it anymore. But that's a challenge. And that's something that a leader has to address and has to help someone grow and become better at, and to figure out and to really level them up over time and hopefully get from them, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I don't know how to be around people all day long in this sort of collaborative. I mean, this is difficult. Or, if you're giving them slack and things like that, they can still be effective. So it's not easy. I certainly don't envy them coming into the workforce at this time in their lives, but this is the opportunity that team members and leaders have to embrace them, not literally, but figuratively, and help them, because they need it, and we need them for our companies to continue to thrive.
Absolutely. So it is a big shift. And to your point, it's both a big challenge, but it is also a big opportunity, right? Because this is the generation that's coming in. This is the generation that's going to be the future of those companies. And so if we make it work for and with them, then we obviously also have a much better chance of doing well in the marketplace, because again, they are also the future consumers. Anyway, I'm speaking like I'm like 500 years old, but I'm getting there. We have a question in the room. I'm not going to be able to swivel my camera towards him because my HDMI cord is okay. So Antti is going to appear behind me. Okay, there you go. We've done it.
Actually in person. Hey, yeah. So question. So I run a company called Superson, and we are an agency that runs purely with independent consultants, freelancers, field experts. So basically, like apart from our client partners and our producers, everyone else kind of comes in and out to projects. And of course, even before COVID, all that teamwork happened remotely practically. And now then when COVID hit, it actually didn't disrupt like our process much. But one thing I've been thinking, even before COVID, because I read this piece and I heard this great speech about like team building, because basically for every single client project, we go through a team building exercise or team building. And that I heard this like how there are certain steps each team has to kind of experience together to gel and start really working like as a proper team. So do you have any like experiences about those sort of steps? Because just very curious. I asked this question from everybody actually. So because I'm also trying to like figure out constantly how to become better at accelerating team building, especially like remotely.
Okay, Chris, were you able to pick it up, because I have my earpod in, and okay, technology is our friend today. Great question. Yes,
I got it.
Good.
So I think there's two distinct things that have to happen here. One, you have to find a way to create trust between the people. So how can you get those people to go from wherever they are to trusting each other more, or understanding each other more, whatever it may be. I do a values exercise with a lot of teams where we get people just to share what their values are, and that just them sharing that amongst each other, they suddenly jump up in trust, because now they understand each person. Even that doesn't mean they agree, doesn't mean that they connect with them, or it's not that it's the same, but they understand, right, where everyone's coming from. It could even be like, why are you in this job? Like, why are you here? What motivates you to show up to work every day? That simple answer gets people connected. So that's one challenge. The second challenge is whatever it is you're trying to do, there's sort of an X and a Y graph. So the more you help people understand why we're going to do something, the more likely they are to actually agree to do it, assuming that it's a good idea, right? If it's a terrible idea, you can never, no matter how much you explain, they're never going to do it. So if you're really trying to get people to do something and they keep telling you no, you may have a really bad idea on your hands. I find that what we want is that people to be engaged. We want them to say, I will do this thing. I will try this thing. I will make this a part of my everyday. This is awesome. But they don't, and that's because we haven't helped them understand why this thing is so awesome and why when they do it, it's going to benefit them and their team and their company more. So I spend almost all of my time on the deep understanding of whatever it is we're trying to do. And then naturally people move over into pretty energized, pretty willing to do stuff. And you get a few people that think this is the coolest thing since the iPhone. And they become your champions. They become the people who go around cleaning up the rest of the people that are being resistant, that will deal with all of the naysayers and anyone who's being a problem. You don't have to do that because they realize, oh my gosh, this is so great. This is going to help us. So connection and trust, and then a deep understanding to create engagement.
Thank you. Yeah, very insightful answer. Yeah.
Great.
I love it. I think the idea of creating champions, I think that again this goes back to the point of, you cannot have everyone on their own being the best manager. So it has to come also from different connection points in a team. So building that trust and understanding and connection, and having those champions that then, in the smaller group chats, in the smaller Slack channels, in the smaller get-togethers, do some of the work for you is really important. Okay, so I just learned something today, which is that the best meetings end early. So I'm going to end it in about 3 minutes. So that means we have time for one more question. If there's anything, how about Esther? You have any? And I'll repeat the. If you just say shortly, then I'll repeat it to Chris, and then everyone can hear it.
Okay. I'm curious. Want to expand on one of the factors you mentioned just now, which is speak one meeting. The context is 80% of the team members are outside of Singapore, so we don't really have that casual conversations in office. So would that lose the personal connection if, let's say, we just skip the one-to-one meetings? That after our one-to-one meetings are supposed to be more intimate, personal. So we'd love to hear this.
Oh, okay, just for everyone, because I see Yang is also saying we'll give people mics. So the question basically is, as a Story Buddy, right, is a team that is sitting across different geographies, and as it's already hard to maintain personal connections, should we really skip one-to-one meetings? Actually, I wanted to ask this question too, so I'm glad I asked her brought up. Should we really? Did you just throw it in there, Chris, just to have something controversial because we all have been trained that one-to-one meetings are so important? Should we really skip them?
Yes, in my companies, I only did in really, really, really bad times like COVID or something really important. I would maybe do a 15-minute one-on-one with my 5 or 6 direct reports just to make sure they were emotionally doing okay. Right? But that was 15 minutes. Okay. Now, the reason I'm saying not to do one-on-ones is that when you're a dispersed group, it's so hard to know. So let me back up. If I'm in a traditional office and I see Dan walk over into someone's office and they have a one-on-one, and I know I got to talk to Dan after he talks to that person, I can see that. We're picking that up in a real time, right? Or I run into Dan in the hallway and say, "Oh, did you talk to so-and-so?" "Oh, yeah." And so I know I can go and bounce over and do my thing now. We don't have that in remote work. So when you have one-on-ones all the time, nobody knows you had them, which means you have to have even more of them to let other people know what you've been doing, which is a complete waste of time. Instead, there should be groups of 5 to 7 people that work together all the time, and you should be having your one-on-one with all of them every week. And the reason for that, and this gets back to our social connection, it gets back to our empathy as a leader. Why is it my job as the leader of that group to solve everyone's problems? I am not capable. I have not lived in everyone's shoes. I do not have all of the answers. I can help, but I am only one person. And so when my group is helping each other solve their challenges, when they're there for each other, this is the difference between, do you need to go to therapy yourself or do you need to go to group therapy? And I think in most situations at work, group therapy is a lot better. Shared stories, shared connection, talking about what we're trying to work on, helping each other get there, being accountable to each other for our goals, not just our boss. And when one person gets removed out of that group because they left, because they got fired, because they got promoted, they died, whatever reason they left, everything doesn't suddenly change. You ever had that? Like one person leaves the company and everything changes so dramatically. That doesn't happen when teams are working to get that stuff together. One person goes and someone else comes in. That team is still moving together. And we found this out sort of almost accidentally. And it's a very uniquely remote and hybrid thing. So HR issue, training, brand new employee, one-on-one, absolutely. But every day getting the work done, do it in your small groups, work together all the time. And you will, that's how we got to be a 5-time fastest growing company, is by us getting rid of the silos, getting rid of the politics and the one-on-one conversations and making everyone accountable together in a group.
Okay, I think that is a great question and a beautiful point to end on. And I will give people back about 3 minutes of this hour. But before we do that, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. I think this was super insightful. I think we got a lot out of this session. I think we also proved how difficult it is to do hybrid meetings. So technology and other things.
You did pretty good. You did pretty
right,
good.
Right. It somehow worked. But yeah, really appreciate your time. And obviously, we will send around your profile, your TikTok QR codes, the discount code for people who want to engage with you more, get the books, get the training, and become remote pros like yourself. And obviously, thank you everyone for joining. Really great to have you here, whether in the room or online, and hope to see you again soon. I know Charlotte, who was reaching out to you, has an entire schedule of upcoming meetings and upcoming sessions. So definitely hope to see you again soon, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.